there should be a sound mentioning that this meeting is now being recorded. Welcome to the Learning Journey to Tech. I'm Karina. I'm an organizer of Women Techmakers Berlin and a product person in tech. And tonight I have the amazing pleasure to talk to 4 inspiring women who have different, unique journeys to tech and a lot to share with everyone joining us today. So let's get this started. Heike, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to ask you, how did you start your journey?
How did I start my journey? Yeah, originally I worked in film production as a colorist, and I was already a bit related to the technology because everything is digital right now. So also like image processing and camera work, everything is digital. So I worked with digital images, but I also thought it's kind of not enough. There's so much more into it, and it would be great to actually, code and make your pipeline easier or do your quality checks automatically. And that's how it started, basically. I think that was about maybe 4 years ago that I really seriously thought about it, and then it took me like 2 more years to get started with it.
Maya, do you also want to answer the question?
Sure. I think it probably took me the longest to get started because I came into tech. I'm right now UX designer or product person, I can also say. And my background is in instructional design, which is not about designing instructions. It's about creating trainings, workshops, any learning experiences. And almost exactly 10 years ago, I was working in Blizzard and we had 800 employees. Yeah. I'm cool. And we had 800 employees and they needed to receive regular product updates and training. And as you can imagine, you cannot really train 800 employees every month, especially if you have a training room with 40 seats in it. And so we started embracing e-learning. And that's where I was sitting in front of the empty screen. And I'm like, I have all the knowledge about the education, of course, but I don't really have anything in my mind about UI buttons. Where do I start? How do I put this on the screen so people can interact with it? And so 10 years ago, I started searching myself anything about UX, UI, or human-computer interaction, as it was known then. And so since then, I was kind of self-studying, going more and more into e-learning. So fast forward 10 years, I was very deep with e-learning. I was designing educational products for healthcare. And I was thinking, where do I go from there? Do I remain forever in e-learning, doing same thing over and over? Or do I go somewhere else? And that's where I was thinking about all my UX self-studies. And I decided to flip a switch and move on. So that's when I made it official, so around a year or 2 ago.
Great. Jessica?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Jessica. I'm originally from the UK, but I've been in Berlin already 10 years. My most recent change over into tech happened in 2017. So actually, similar with Heike, I'd been working in movies originally, but mainly in the UK. And when I moved to Germany, I started working in coffee and ended up being a coffee roaster for a number of years. And in 2017, I kind of had made the decision I wanted to do something different again. Also feeling like getting a little bit older, maybe wanting to earn a little bit more money than you earn in gastronomy, maybe not wanting to do so much heavy lifting or standing on my feet so much, and also looking for like a career, like a challenge to move myself further. I'd had interest in tech itself earlier than that. Even as far back as like at art college, I'd made some like Flash animation websites, which had been a lot of fun. So I wasn't completely fresh into the topic, but I started to explore it more in like 2017 with Code Academy, kind of like picking up little bits, and then made this decision to kind of go for it. I think, like you say, I like flip the switch of like, okay, you know, this is like serious. What do I do to make this happen?
Meredith, what about you?
So I also came to coding in a roundabout way. I actually also at one point worked in film and television. I worked in the music industry. But the last thing that I did before changing careers was working with YouTube channels and trying to monetize content on YouTube. And I survived the 2016 election during that period of time and felt really bad about my job. So I was looking for something new. I had decided to move to Berlin, and as part of that decision signed up for a boot camp. And in all honesty, I don't think I had actually committed to changing my career into tech until probably halfway through boot camp. I had kind of intended to check it out and maybe learn a little bit, maybe I'd end up as a product manager. But I had a lot of friends who were in tech. They had been giving me a lot of crap for a long time about trying to use Excel like a programming language and telling me I needed to learn a real language. And it turns out they were absolutely right. And I never looked back.
What was one of the hardest things when you were starting?
I'd say that I had a couple of false starts. As I said, I'd had friends encouraging me to learn how to code for a while. And I had gotten kind of halfway through a Python course on WebEx and halfway through a CS class on edX and gotten frustrated with some of the online courses where it felt like they were telling me to type something and I was just typing exactly what they told me to type. And I guess the struggle for me was that learning on my own, I had trouble finding signs of progress. And so I had a couple of false starts with learning to code before I signed up for bootcamp.
Yeah. What about you, Heike?
Yeah, I can totally relate to this. You saw me nodding, right? Yeah, I started with all the online courses I feel like that are out there. And I choose Python already because I knew I can use it for automating the boring stuff, and as the book says. And yeah, but it didn't feel like I make progress. Yeah, there was always a gap between the theory and even the practical theory from the online courses and the reality. So even if you build a nice tool with Python or maybe a website with Dask, which is a framework which helps you actually, it's like, how am I applying this in my real world work? There was always a big gap, and that's why I thought I need something else. I need another framework for myself to actually apply this. And I was looking into different boot camps, and we're looking out for something that would actually also accelerate this process. The first step was also being more involved in tech community in Berlin, actually. This also helped me a lot, though. There's so much support out there. And I'm really, really grateful for this, for all the Python ladies who helped me. But it also, got clear for me that I want to do like a full-time bootcamp because I want to spend this time, quality time, to really do this. Yeah.
I see Jessica nodding a lot. Do you want to add something to that?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Heike, but I think we met through PyLadies, or did we meet through Charlotte? I can't quite remember, but one of the two.
Both at the same time.
Yeah. And yeah, for sure, a lot of my tech journey was to do with being in the community and going to community events and having like that feedback loop for what other people were going through in relation to what I was going through, both in terms of like struggles or difficulties, but also in terms of like successes and being able to like share feelings of joy of like, I've just completed this course, I've been able to build this API or a website. And I think that was like a real motivator for me, even when there were times where I felt struggle, or it was quite difficult. I mean, I remember early on, I also joined an online community called, it's like hashtag 100 Days of Code, which I would highly recommend. It's a great way to find kind of like a, what do they call it? A accountability buddy. But you just have like a huge group of people online as your accountability buddy. And it's great because there's a community out there and you have to post every day. So you're like, for me, at least, it like really helped me keep going. But you also see a lot of people posting their successes, and it can get to the point where you feel quite overwhelming of like, oh, I'm not getting this quick enough, or like, I can see that person learn how to do this in like a month and it's taking me 2 months. And that can become a sinking feeling, which I think was one of the things that I really had to like try and overcome. But being in the community and having people like Heike and other PANELISTS and Women Who Go and Women Tech Makers going to those events, like really bolstered my confidence that this was actually possible and not a wild and impossible thing to do.
Great to hear. So I actually want to dig a bit deeper into, you've all shared great advice and a lot about how you started and some of the hardest things there, but maybe also how, if you remember, some tips to overcome them. Maya, maybe you want to share on the topic?
Wow. Well, for me, I think the hardest was to just decide to commit and do it instead of, should I do it? Should I not? It's a kind of big change, but maybe not a big change. What do I do? I need to search for jobs after I commit. So too much work. And it's, to be honest, I think I did quite a lot of research about what am I committing to. I also went to different meetups where the different bootcamp alumni were meeting just to check out how do they look like, what kind of people are there, who signs up for this stuff. I was familiar with what UX does because I also worked for Amazon, where there was quite a big internal community for design in general. And you could also be like present there, even if you don't talk to people. You can just be in like discussion lists and everything and just learn through observing and soaking up the knowledge. So I kind of knew what I would be going towards and what the job is, but I was mostly really overcoming this, like resistance to change. So you kind of want to change something, but you don't really want to commit your resources to it because maybe magically things will change. And I think like main motivator for me was doing enough research, really. So figuring out what is going to happen, because I like to know what's going to happen. And of course, my husband just said, "Oh, come on, like do it." Like, yeah, I guess I should. So I'm not really sure if that counts as a good advice, but I would say sum up, do your research and maybe also get some backup list friends or family members who can also be supportive and give you like a final kick if you need it.
On that note, because you were mentioning family and friends, and then also accountability buddies, I want to know more about that. So do you keep that? How long did you keep that relationship going? Did you have maybe a mentor, multiple mentors? How was it for you? Maybe Jessica, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've made so many friends actually through tech, and like many that I consider very close friends. So that's been an amazing additional thing to this whole process, actually. And I think it is really important that you have some areas of your life that are a little bit stable when you're going through a change like this. I know for me, like that was like really important, and I was in a really privileged position to have that. I also totally recognize that many people do this and have many external factors that make it even tougher, and I like really respect and applaud anyone that's doing that. I mean, I think in the pre-chat we talked a little bit also about working alongside trying to learn to program, and like for me that was definitely not going to work. I was working a job where I was like in an upper management position, and I frankly was working a lot of hours. And I was just too tired to sit at the end of that and like then try and think about something else or learning. I mean, even though I really liked it, I would do bits, but I knew realistically that was not gonna make the cut for me. Which is why I like took a leap of faith, which is I think what I was trying to relate to of this flipping the switch of saying, okay, this will be my focus and I'll really try and make this change. And saving, like making sure I would be able to find myself in a situation like financially, essentially, that I could take time out to make that my focus. So not even have a part-time job, maybe 1 or 2 shifts here and there, but like really give it everything and then reassess. And I know someone was asking in the chat of like, how do you know when you're ready? And I think that's a great question. I'm not sure I can give you an answer. I think it's something within yourself where you feel like, okay, I'm at the point now where what I really need is I really need to be in a working environment. And that's the difference, because learning online is one thing, and you could learn online literally forever because there's so much stuff out there to learn. You will never be able to like learn enough as we try to trick ourselves into thinking. But if you do get to a point where you're like, this is all starting to click in, I enjoy it, it makes a lot of sense, but I need that environment now. So that for me was like the change in that area.
I see Meredith nodding a lot. Meredith, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think you're never gonna feel. I don't know anybody who really felt ready and like they had mastered anything when they were looking for their first job. If you are asking yourself if you're ready, you probably are. In my experience with my first job, when you come in as a junior, you're not expected to know everything. You're not even, I was not even really expected to be entirely self-sufficient. For what I found was that what they wanted was for me to, even if I didn't know like the specifics of the language, to have the resources to go looking for an answer independently and to be able to start to be independent in that way. And also be comfortable enough so that when I was pairing with somebody more senior, I understood what was going on and could keep up with that, and that I was ready to learn from the people around me. And maybe if you're looking for a more concrete way to judge that, I would recommend, I know that for me, one of the most important things about learning was pairing with other people. Pair programming is still a very big part of my day-to-day work. And it was a big part of my learning experience as well. And if you're wondering if you're ready, do some pair programming with somebody with a bit more experience, and maybe they can give you some of that feedback. You'll get an idea of whether you're out of your depth, and they may be able to get a sense of your skills. And it's also not all that different from the application process. I interviewed in a lot of different ways. No 2 tech interviews were the same, but one of them was doing a code kata with pair programming with a more senior engineer. It's excellent practice. It's a lot more fun than working on your own. And it's a great way to get kind of a temperature check on where you are.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I also actually want to go back to the interviewing and landing the first job, but a bit later, because I want to really touch base on the learning experience, since you all did different boot camps or coding classes, or learned by yourself, so you had different journeys. And I want to understand more about that time and cost investment, right? Because as you put it, like how do you manage that, right? When you're starting this journey, you're wondering if you're ready. But you're wondering if you're ready, and you're thinking, should I learn by myself? Should I do a boot camp? What does it mean? Can I still have a job in parallel? How do I plan for all of this? And yeah, maybe Maya, would you like to start answering this one?
Yeah, well, I think I did the craziest stuff. I went into the bootcamp while working full-time. I do not recommend it. Please don't do that. This is a bit crazy. Why I did this is just I did my second master's degree online, and it was relatively easy, so I had to sacrifice my vacations to write my theses and whatnot, but the normal day-to-day stuff was quite chilled. So I was online bootcamp, I can do it while working full-time. I also talked to the advisors, and I did the UX design with Career Foundry. And before you sign up, they put you through like a little sort of sanity check with their advisors. And they said, yeah, it's perfectly fine. 10 hours per week is what you can do. 10 hours per week, I can do that. And it was definitely not 10 hours per week, because the exercises in there are very varied. Because one day you can write, let's say, an essay about design thinking, and the other you like design a high fidelity prototype, blah. So, or like organize user interviews with at least 5 people. I'm like, wow, in 1 week, that's interesting. So yeah, it was a bit hard to foresee actually and to plan it. So I had to be really, really strategic about it. What I did with the course, you can actually look through all the exercises in advance, just kind of scan through them. You can also see what is required to kind of pass the course, what goes into your portfolio, because in the end you create, as UX designer, you create a project for your portfolio with a case study, with the deliverables. So I was focusing on what goes into portfolio and then putting more effort there, and then sort of like skipping over stuff that's just, purely educational. And that definitely helped. So it also helped again with family and friends to outsource some of your home tasks to them. So let's say if you have like somebody for whom you usually cook, let's say, so for that duration they cook for themselves, that's it. Or let's say maybe you take vacation separately and you spend your vacation like writing something or focusing on your task. So it's really about more like restructuring your working day. But all in all, I do not really recommend it. But my main concern was that I didn't really want to just become unemployed. I really don't like searching for jobs, and I'm very dedicated to working. So I decided to just, I'll just push through my like 50, 60-hour weeks. I can do that, but I'll just feel safe, really. So for me, that was more the priority.
Thanks, Maya. Heike, do you want to also talk about this?
Yeah, that's really a tough decision you did, Maya. Wow, really brave. And I think, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it myself, because I quit the job, or I stopped working full time in order to do the bootcamp. When this decision was made, I wanted to spend like all time I have for the bootcamp and for learning to code in this framework, because it's an investment, right? You pay for it, and it's not really a little sum. It's actually something you have to be mindful about. And yeah, sure, you have to work maybe at the same time to get this money in there. Yeah, but it's good to have this time there, I think, and spend every minute you can with instructors, and grab them if they run away, because you actually want to learn this in this time. And yeah, I would rather dedicate all the time I have into the bootcamp during the time it's running. And yeah, it was 8 hours or more, normally more, to actually get this task done. And yeah, it was a tough time, but it was also fun. And it was also like in school back then, right? You have your class of your colleagues and the other pupils, and you actually grow together. And it was a bit like this. So the community within our class was also something that pushed me, or that supported the whole class and every one of us. That was another good thing that just came into my mind. And yeah, something Maya also said, looking out about the program to actually see what's coming. I have to say that didn't really work out for me or the website we had at our bootcamp. But it was anyway a good class and a good bootcamp, and we learned Python and data science, which was the main tech on the bootcamp, right? But everything else I couldn't see from the schedule, actually, I have to be honest. But yeah, it was good anyway. And it helped me now, yeah, getting the job I wanted, and actually not going that far away from film, which is actually very exciting. I managed to put it all together in the end, which is so exciting. I'm working for Dolby now, and I was using their tools before, and now I'm working on a team developing the tools. So this is actually really exciting for me, and I would say it's always worth taking the step to change your career if you want to, even if you don't feel that ready. It's awesome. Just do it. It's your chance. So, yeah.
Meredith, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Just so for me, the choice to do a boot camp had a lot of external factors. I was between jobs, so I had the time. I had kind of taken a leap of faith in moving to Berlin already. And so it was, maybe I certainly wasn't doing as much research as some of the others. I would say that for me, the choice to do a boot camp, in hindsight, what that was about was you can learn the coding part anywhere. For me, doing a boot camp, and I did the full stack boot camp at Le Wagon, the upside for me was that it made it easier because I was devoting my full day to it. They were 10-hour days, and I was exhausted at the end of every one of them. I know a lot of people who have very successfully learned to code on their own or done part-time boot camps and worked at the same time. It absolutely can be done. But I think for me, the opportunity of a boot camp is that you get support, and you're less likely to get discouraged and give up because you do have that support system. You have that collaboration. You're going through it with each other. In my case, at Le Wagon, it was a really interesting international group of people with a lot of varied experiences, and it just made it a lot. It made it fun, and it had that kind of group spirit. And at the end of it, for me, maybe the most valuable part is we built a product. We built demo products, and so it built that confidence walking away. The last 3 weeks, you're building demo projects from scratch, and it means that on your last day when you present your product, you have a relative amount of confidence that you can make something that works, and that the code that you've learned is valuable, and that you actually have learned enough to be kind of useful. So that was my experience, my learning experience. As I said, I kind of went into it thinking that I was unlikely to be the kind of person who wanted to spend 8 hours a day coding. I thought that sounded kind of lonely. And what I discovered was that it's actually can be a very collaborative experience. And for me, doing a boot camp recreated that feeling of being on a team, which I have now found in the workplace as well.
Great. Jessica, what about your experience?
Yeah. So I'm like the odd one out of the four. I didn't actually do a boot camp. But I looked in, it wasn't an option for me. I also looked at going back to university and studying like computer science or something in the field for like 3 or 4 years, whatever like kind of course it would take. I guess it's like many things in life. Like you have to line up what your options are and kind of go with what makes most sense for you. So I guess that's what everyone here is saying, is it's very individual. It's very down to circumstance. I felt that I was in a place where it was fine for me to schedule my own process. So I would use Google Calendars a lot. I would like have almost like a school calendar of like, you're going to work on this for 2 hours and then you're going to switch and work on this other topic for 2 hours. And that worked really well for me. I think it was a good time because I've tried to do things like that before in the past and it did not work. So it is not maybe down to a certain personality type, but also down to certain circumstances. I received money from the government, which super helps, like Arbeitslosengeld. That's something that I find amazing about being in Germany, that you have availability to this, and there isn't quite the stigma that there is around this kind of money, which in the UK at least there is, but I also heard in other countries is also the case. I also had the opportunity to receive something called a Bildungsgutschein, which you can also apply to. And I also heard today you can also apply to this if you're in Kurzarbeit, as well as if you're actually unemployed. That's an additional change now for the coronavirus situation. This paid for me to go. I could have gone to a bootcamp, but I didn't know that at the time. So like many of the bootcamps that the other panelists have been to actually in some form will accept this also as payment, which is awesome, but I didn't know that was available. So what my Arbeitsvermittler offered me was to go to a company where I would be able to learn web development. The reality of that was I went and sat in a room with a computer, but I did that instead of just sitting at home. Like the content of learning was very much up to me and very self-directed, which I liked. And I kind of already had in my mind the kind of things, the kind of topics I would like to learn or the direction I would like to go in, which was like data science and AI. I absolutely do not do that now. I work as a backend engineer, working in Golang predominantly at a company called Ecosia. And that's fine. Like you're going to go down different paths and different things are going to pop up at different times. I still kind of would like to maybe go back into machine learning direction. But I kind of figured that was maybe not the best part of the market for me to get a job in, which I know we're going to talk about jobs and there's a lot of questions coming up around jobs. I did manage to get into a great program though. It's like a scholarship called Rails Girls Summer of Code. Applications have unfortunately closed for this year and the applicants are now waiting to see who will get the scholarship. Unfortunately, they only have funding for around 10 teams and they get almost 300 teams apply. So it's pretty tricky. But this was great because this gave me some of what like Meredith's talking about of collaborative coding. Coding on a project with more people than just yourself is so different. And I think if you've only coded on your own things or just on maybe like a project with one other person, open source is a great way to get that opportunity before maybe getting a job position, because like, as we will most certainly talk about, it is difficult to get your first job. And I think anything you can add to your portfolio that shows you're able to work in a collaborative situation is like really going to strengthen you as a candidate.
Thank you. You actually answered the question that came to my mind, but I'm going to ask it. And I'm going to start with Heike and Meredith and Maya if they want to contribute afterwards. How do you build your portfolio or contribute to open source? How did you approach this, right? So you were learning on a self-learning journey like Jessica, or you were doing a bootcamp, but when did you already start thinking, or did you start thinking about building this kind of experience portfolio, something to show maybe also inside the bootcamp? Heike, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I actually had a couple of projects in mind before the bootcamp, but I felt like I'm not able to do it because it's too big. And I saw this, I took this into the and my goal was to achieve this or to realize this. And that was actually the case. On the end, that was my final project and I could manage to realize this. And that was also a good thing to build up your portfolio. After the bootcamp, I had a portfolio and I had this main project done, and I had it in a way that I could show it to other people on a web interface. So that was actually, how I got more visibility, I think, in terms of what can you actually do with your programming skills. So yeah. I didn't contribute to open source though, actually, but I'm studying now with tiny steps, and I feel like I should have done this earlier because it's something actually more easy. It didn't look so easy for me from the outside, to be honest, but it's actually quite good to get into it. You do your pull request, work on it, you deliver, and then you have the community to talk about it and to tell you what other ways you could go, or what other solutions may be interesting or good. And yeah, so I could recommend actually doing open source earlier in your learning journey. Yeah.
Thank you. Maya, you had a slightly different bootcamp also. Do you want to share about how you approach this? There's actually, building on a question that we got from the chat, like ways to apply, and I'm looking for ways to apply my knowledge in a meaningful way. And, yeah.
Sure. So for a career founder in the UX design course, you actually work on your portfolio through the course, so you do apply it, and you are not really like learning in the way that you just read the text or view the video and then create an essay or an answer a multiple choice after it, but you do have, of course, some theory, which you need, but in general, you are working on a realistic project. Of course, you don't have like a team or stakeholders or customers, but you do your research, you create your wireframes, everything that comes into building a product. And so that was, I think, one of the reasons why I joined the bootcamp, because as I mentioned, I didn't want to quit my job. I was very attached to it. Then I was very happy that somebody would give me the service of laying out my learning journey and also giving me ideas of what can I put in my portfolio, because considering that my main job was solving problems with educational products, I really didn't have any imagination left to create some projects on my own or come up with something different. So I was just like, just tell me what to do, I'll just do it. That was quite helpful, because in that course you actually end up with at least 3 projects. You will have your 2 UX projects, one kind of low fidelity, quick, very rapid prototyping. The other is very high fidelity. And also there is a specialization you can choose. And there you can either have your own portfolio coded if you go for front-end development, or you can have UI specialization. So in the end, you have actually a portfolio with at least 3 projects, which is quite good for the start. It's very useful because you need to spend additional time on creating it after the bootcamp. You also get a support from the career advisor. I think practically all bootcamps do that, to my knowledge, but Career Founder definitely does. And there also your career sort of coach can also go with you through your portfolio as well, from the point of view of what's interesting for hiring managers. And you also have the support from your tutor, from your mentor. So quite a lot of feedback and support, which for me was also important, because I was not really surrounded by UX designers with whom I could like chat and show my stuff and get feedback. I was most surrounded by instructional designers who were impressed by my knowledge as well. I want to have some other professionals too around me. So getting through the bootcamp and having some people from the industry really helped, because like somebody asked, like, how do you flip a switch? And you're never ready. So you need to have somebody who will sort of confirm you that you are ready, because yourself, you will either like overestimate if you're very new and you just don't know what to compare it with, or you will consistently underestimate because you always know that there is somebody better than you out there, but that should not really deter you from realizing your worth. And in that case, really getting some feedback from anybody really is really great. And actually applying for jobs can be also quite a good feedback. If you get any feedback from recruiters or hiring managers, even if it's, let's say, like negative feedback, like, I get a lot, like, we're looking more for a UI designer, a more visual designer, like, you're very smart and everything, but how about beautiful things? And so I know that, yeah, I'm good at some things, but maybe not very, very oriented at the UI, which is intended, because I never really wanted to be a UI designer. So yeah, point is get feedback, and feedback will definitely help you with understanding who you are, what you're doing, and also with creating portfolio as well.
Thanks, Maya. Meredith, do you want to add from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, talking about portfolio, in the end, I don't think my portfolio was what got me a job. It was important I found that it was important to have worked on enough projects to be able to talk about them in an interview setting. But I think the only person who was impressed with a portfolio project was a completely non-technical person who just thought it was kind of pretty. And for somebody who was not applying for a design job, it was a shiny thing. What I found was that finding a job in tech is the same thing that I found about finding a job anywhere, and that it's about relationships and working a network. I was looking for a job for quite a while, just applying online, and was getting really discouraged. And then I attended a couple of events and quite quickly turned that experience around. In the end, I had half a dozen interviews, all of them either because I knew somebody who worked at the company or I was able to drop a name. I mean, in one case, somebody posted something on the Women Techmakers Berlin Slack and I put their name in the cover letter, and it got me through enough of the screening process to get an interview. I mean, it was somebody I'd never met, but having the name of somebody at a company can make a difference. Or that I had met somebody in person at a meetup or a recruiting event or something like that and had a chance to make an impression in person. Applying with your resume and your portfolio alone as a junior, I think is really hard, because so much of what the value you're going to bring as a junior is not about what you already know, but about what you're going to be able to learn and do in the future. And so a lot of that is best communicated in person. I see that Julia, I see somebody commenting that it's sad that it's about who you know, but in my experience, it was not about gatekeeping. The people that I knew were not because I had connections to influential people. It was because the Berlin tech community is quite open, and I went out to meetups and met like-minded people. They don't have to be high-ranking people. Often the people who I was talking to were other quite junior people. But you know, as a junior, in my experience, recruiters aren't focusing a lot of their energy on going out and sourcing junior leads. You kind of have to be the one to reach out. You know, they're not spending ad money on those ads. They're not focusing on combing through LinkedIn pages for that. So yeah, you do have to kind of do that reaching out. But as I said, it was not about knowing somebody specific. It was about talking to a lot of people and reaching out through in that way. So yeah, building a project is important for building was important in building confidence, but it was less about having a shiny portfolio website to show off than having something to talk about in the interviews.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to hear from our other panelists as well about how did you land your first job in tech. So you've been on the learning journey. What about the moment that you got that first job? How was it for you? Maybe Maya, do you wanna continue? I saw you nodding and smiling when Meredith was talking.
Yeah, I'm kind of like looking at people saying, well, it is about who you know. In my case, well, it wasn't really about who I know in the sense of somebody promoted me or sponsored me, but it was through people I knew before, because I also always had some side gigs as an instructional designer, doing workshops, helping like smaller businesses and individual people with organizing trainings, or let's say somebody wants to introduce training in the company. And I did a workshop with one very small, very early stage startup, and they seemed to like me for some reason. And then they just got in contact with me absolutely out of nowhere. I was kind of sitting minding my own business, and they got in touch with me saying, hey, we're going forward with our super awesome project. Do you know anybody who wants to join? Wink, wink. And I'm like, well, actually, I might want to join, wink, wink, because they were quite a nice cross-section of still educational technology, so building a learning management system, which would also also powered the cardiology online learning platform. And so I had quite a lot of overlap being a UX designer who could help with customizing the front end for that learning management system, because it was based on an open source software, but just needed some redesign to make the UI better, UX better, and also it needed some support from like a product owner, and they also needed some support with instructional design for the technical writers who were all medical people, but they didn't have a lot of experience with, let's say, creating trainings or explaining their thoughts in a more engaging way. And so I became this 3-in-1 person in a startup, which I think is only possible in an early stage startup. I also do not recommend having like 3 hats on your head, because it's very crazy. You end up doing very little of everything. But that was quite a good learning experience, because I kind of learned both sides, the UX and the PO side, which for me was quite important, because that I think now in the interviews, because my startup is sadly out of business due to crisis. So I'm looking for my second job in UX, which is also quite challenging at the moment. But at the same time, I feel like, let's say, going through the portfolio experience, through the bootcamp experience, through my job obviously experience, and also getting sometimes denial, sometimes interesting interviews with people, that really boosted actually my confidence, because I got way more feedback about my UX skills than I have ever had, or than I could imagine myself. Because let's say I completed some design exercises, I got very awesome feedback, and now I know that the things that I want to do, I'm capable of, and other people see it. I just need to find a job which is looking for me as well, which is not looking, let's say, for unicorn or for a visual designer, for somebody that I don't really want to be. So it's not super easy right now, because I also had some denials, in the sense that there was either hiring freeze, or the position got canceled, or like the whole department was let go, unfortunately. So it's not easy for everybody, if that's of any encouragement. But I think it will pass, because it's also not my first financial crisis. I have been almost out of job in 2009, but I managed to move to Ireland, get a gig with Blizzard. So if we keep searching, we will find it. And I also had experience working with other colleagues who got reduced and redundant, and of course, not all of them got, let's say, a position in a month or 2, but after a while, everybody got back on track, and some actually ended up better than they started. So I would see this, let's say, if you're looking for a job right now, if you were let go, just see this as an opportunity to maybe chill a little bit, because I was actually quite happy that I could spend some time focusing on myself and thinking about what am I going to do next, and catching up on my side gigs. And I also started tutoring with a career foundry course. So right now I'm quite occupied, actually, despite being unemployed full time. So in short, do not lose hope, just get feedback, stay in touch with people who can support you, and everything will pass. So if there's something that is not working out well for you, then just learn from it, maybe adjust some of your tactics, or talk to somebody who can maybe see it from the other side and help you, change something, or see maybe positive side of it.
Thanks, Maya. Jessica, how was landing your first job in tech? And maybe to expand on that, how long did it take? It was part of the questions that we got in the chat.
So I feel like I was incredibly lucky, because Ecosia was pretty much the first place I applied to. And I applied while I was doing Rails Girls Summer of Code, and agreed with them to work immediately after finishing the scholarship. So that's definitely one end of the scale, but I agree with Maya, like that probably isn't the most common path. Like I definitely have friends in this community that have waited over a year to find their first position in. I actually kind of took, a few things. So I think like hiring in tech is pretty booked, in my opinion. Like you almost will never see junior positions posted, and often the case is that by the time a company kind of comes to the decision that they're ready to hire an intern or a junior position, they already have people lined up from people who have already approached them, or people that they have been recommended through people that already work there. So it is really tough. And I think what Meredith was saying of like, you know, you have to package yourself and you have to put yourself out there. And that's a huge amount of work. And it's pretty crushing to get denials because it's like very hard not to take that personally, I feel. Even though, you know, we all know like there's many reasons, like Maya's saying, why positions suddenly are no longer available, or, you know, it's a lot to do with who is the person that applied at the same time. Like maybe they have one thing you don't have, and that is just the way it goes. But I think, so what I actually did was I actually applied at Ecosia for a position that was too senior. I don't know, it sounds a bit ridiculous, but it was probably a position I couldn't fill the expertise for or what they were expecting. But I managed to kind of meet them previous to that through a Women Who Go meetup. And just by kind of having slight more opportunity to talk with the engineers there, kind of get my toe in the door. And after going and having an interview, I think it was clear to everyone I was not knowledgeable enough to fill the role that they were looking for at that time. But they actually then chose to create this internship position for me. So that's incredibly fortunate thing to fall into, because of course I hadn't applied for that, and then they said, okay, we really like you, we think in 6 months time you're going to be great, but we still see that you need some further development, so we'd like to work with you to get there. And I feel incredibly fortunate that they made that decision, because disclaimer, I still work there, so it did work out for me really well. I also know people that have gone into that situation, and after the 6 months it was just like not gonna continue. And I will tell you, every day of the 6 months I was petrified that they would let me go, even though I was receiving positive feedback, and kind of, in my opinion, giving a lot of productivity within the team I was in. I think, you know, a huge tip that Rona from Women Who Go gave me was, and although this was not my experience, I do believe this would be super helpful, and maybe some of the other panelists did this, is apply. First of all, apply at places even if they're not having that job position up. Apply anyway, tell them what you do know. Even if you're like just ticking a few of the technologies that they have on there, even if they don't have a job at all in that realm, like maybe do a bit of research. But if you really like that company and you really like what their company values are, I would say go for it regardless. And then second of all, what Rona told me was kind of apply at places that you also are not too worried about being rejected at, because that will help you get better, because interviewing in itself is a skill which you need to train. It's very rarely the case that you go into the first interview and you then land the job. I mean, I was crying after my interview at Ecosia, and I'm thankful that I got the job, but it was a horrible experience, to be honest. I do not look forward to having to ever do that again. But yeah, I think that would be my tips of like, apply places you're not that worried about being rejected from, and then apply even if there's not positions up. And unfortunately, it is just the case that you have to kind of push your toe through the door. And it is also the case, unfortunately, in this industry that there are biases and there are discriminations, and tech is not free from those, even though it is a younger industry and maybe moving more in a direction that would make it more inclusive. Unfortunately, it is the case that certain companies, they might want you to join because you're a woman, but that might be the only reason they want you to join. So you have to be wary, unfortunately. I think we all live that as a day-to-day reality, unfortunately. someone's just asking if it was a paid internship, and it was. Yeah, 6 months would have been way too long for me to support myself out of my own pocket. They paid me an hourly rate, although I was working full time, that matched what a working student in Berlin receives, which went up this year, but at the time was like $12.30 an hour, and I think it has gone up now to $12.60.
Awesome. Heike, how about your experience?
With my first job, or how did I got into it? Yeah, it was more, I think, the combination of my previous experience and the fact that I went into coding. So there was a good chance for both, for the company and for me, to get into this. And I wouldn't have applied for this job, to be honest, because it was a senior position for a software engineer, and I haven't studied software engineering like at university as a computer scientist or whatever, not at all. So I wouldn't dare to apply for a senior position. But I just wanted to meet the team, because I actually cited some of the work in my bachelor thesis. So my goal was just to meet them in the office and get an interview and get to talk to them. And the interview itself was actually really good, really nice. And it took 4 hours with pizza in between. We actually had a coding challenge, like live coding. I was sitting here, they were pointing at the laptop. Okay, let's do it. Just write us a test with PyTest, some function tests, and we did this. But that was the only part where I was a bit nervous. Everything else was actually nice, good atmosphere with ex-people. So that wasn't that scary. But I did train my interview skills a bit before, because I don't know, had like, I think 5 interviews where actually was on site in the office, because it was still possible. It was last year, and a few more online or coding challenges via some of the online portals. So I had a lot of training. So I wasn't nervous anymore. And I think the fact that I actually wasn't really reaching for the position, just maybe in my subconscious, yeah, made me more easy and relaxed. I just wanted to meet those people and talk to them, talk to the engineers. And so that was a different approach than this sometimes weird power situation you have when you're there for an interview and you want them to like you, but you have to keep in mind that this is a company where you're maybe going to work for the next years, so you have to like them as well. And I don't know if some people forget this, but it's easy to go into this trap where this power structure is kind of pushing you down and you're pushing your confidence down, and that's something you can keep in mind. It's also you who want to work there, right? So yeah, I think this is something to remember. Yeah.
Thank you. There are a few questions related to this. One of them is there an ageism problem in the industry? Can people enter the industry a bit later in life? I would leave this free form if anybody wants to answer it.
Well, I would say like yes and no. I guess with any prejudices in there. So I myself, I consider myself like late in life, so to say, although I guess what do you count as late in life? But I'm not 20 years old, I'm almost 40, and that is kind of the time when people say, well, is it too late for me to learn something new? Like, well, not really. You're not really alone. Let's say with the Career Found, we had a special even Slack channel for people around 40 who are doubting whether they should be studying it or not, and there's a lot of us, so it's not really something like out of ordinary or something that is abnormal. That is perfectly normal, to be honest. And to be honest, my sister also changed her career into tech quite late, I think in her late 30s, and now she is with IBM. So she's 10 years older than me. So as you can see, you can get into tech quite quite well along in your life. And in terms of ageism, as I said, it's like yes and no, because I had an interesting experience where I was going through the interview and everything was perfect, like your skills are awesome, great feedback, and then somebody like pops like an age-related question, and then suddenly people stop talking to you and you kind of get like very evasive, like, you're not a culture fit. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I also noticed that, let's say, like the oldest person in the company, so I can understand, yeah, maybe it is a bit weird for those people to work with you because you're kind of like their mother a little bit, but borderline their mother, of course. But yeah, that happened, but it was really, to be honest, like the only time in my experience. So I wouldn't really say that everybody's out there against people around 40, because there are actually people around 40. Life doesn't end after 30 or 35 or even 40. So there's quite a lot of like grown-ups in the tech industry and looking for jobs and hiring and applying. So my last startup, even though it was a startup, it was actually quite full of people around my age, so in their late 30s, early 30s. So that's perfectly fine.
That's encouraging to hear. And yes, the inclusion part for everybody, also different age ranges, I think it's something that we still need to work on in Berlin overall. Another question here, actually there's a couple of questions, but the first one in them is there a field in programming that is more required in Berlin?
Yeah, I was looking at this question already. I forgot to answer it when I was speaking, but I wanted to. I actually think that when you do quality assurance or software testing, there's actually a field that it's more easy to enter for some reason, because you do have to be able to code, and you will be exposed to different coding languages. But you also do a lot of backend and a lot of more structural things. You don't code all the time. You also do a lot of clicking around in databases and Jenkins GUIs. And maybe, yeah, I was trying to figure out why it is actually easier, but I have the feeling it's easier to enter this section, maybe because it's a newer field, and in some companies you have software engineers which are working there already for like 10 years, 15 years, and this position is filled, the team is full. But QA and testing, it's not that old. It's, well, there has been quality assurance and testing around for years, sure, since they have software on the market probably, but not like this, not with continuous integration pipelines and continuous deployments. And this is the newest thing that just came out the last years. And I think that's the reason why this is a field where you can enter easier. And also people sometimes don't know themselves how to handle it. Even the so-called experts or the software engineers that are on the team already for 10 years. Because it's such a new field, you can get into it with a fairly amount of knowledge and you learn on the job, and it's more accepted, I think. So I would recommend this as an entry point more than maybe really specified AI software engineering part. Yeah.
Anybody want to add to the answer?
I mean, I definitely also had this feeling personally for me without having any science background. Like there was areas of data science that I was very much interested in, but were probably a little out of reach. I'm not really sure that's 100% correct. And I 100% know people in the industry that have those jobs and went straight there. But it definitely was kind of my feeling that somewhere in the web development area would maybe be companies where they would be a little more inclusive, maybe a little more open to kind of having people without a traditional background. also not, like a lot of the larger companies, whether this is 100% necessary or not, do say that you need a computer science degree on their job description. I would always say apply anyway. But yeah, that for me was always a little off-putting.
Yeah. There's a question around what exactly are the titles in web development, JS developer, React developer. I heard it's better for your wage and your standing in the company and to go for regular development positions. And then what's a wage that's expected of a junior, non-junior? I assume this means intern?
There is a wide range of ways to answer that question. There is, as far as I can tell, absolutely zero standardization of titles. From what I can tell, titles are 100% meaningless. And, you know, there are people calling themselves junior for years. There are people who are calling them seniors after a couple of years. I can't see any correlation between title and actual function. There are some titles that tend to have, to imply more things. A lead is expected to be supervising a team, a head of engineering, that's pretty clear what it is. But as for junior, senior, in between, they're just words. I would encourage you to not ever really call yourself a junior developer. It may be your job title, but calling yourself I don't know anybody who really is going to make a strong distinction there. And as for salary, I found that the range there was almost as crazy and wide in Berlin. In my first round of interviewing, I personally saw offers between 26,000 a year and 42,000 a year, which is, I mean, it's a huge factor of difference. I know I have now spoken to people who are 5 years in and still making less than 30,000 euro. I know people whose opening offers were way more than that. There is no rule of thumb, and it's going to depend on whether you're in Berlin, where in Germany you are, where in the world you are. If you can work remote in the US, you could start out at double what you can do here in Berlin. Good information is hard to find, and the information that I have found tells me that there's no standard. It's pretty crazy.
Thank you. There's another question and some answers to it in the chat, but from Alicia, I heard that only bootcamp is not always enough and that the market is already saturated with juniors after bootcamps. How to deal with such information from the market, as it seems a bit discouraging? How to check if it's really the case on the job market?
I can take a shot at that one. The good news about boot camps is that they have been around long enough and there are enough of them that most people are familiar with boot camps and are relatively familiar with what skills you'll have coming out of a boot camp. And so what I found in my personal experience and in talking to other people, there are people who are looking for that skill set and are prepared for the level of experience that they'll get from a boot camp grad. I have not seen a lot of stigma around it. That said, it's not, you are going in with no experience. It is like being fresh out of school. I haven't seen it be a disadvantage when compared to, say, a fresh university graduate. But certainly if you're up against people who have been in the workplace for a year or two, yeah, you're not going to have that experience. And that's just about finding the right employer with the right attitude. But, you know, especially here in Berlin, the good news about there being a lot of boot camps is that people are aware of what a boot camp brings and what boot camp grads can do. And so it is possible to get a job as fresh out of a boot camp. That said, you know, if you are coming out of a boot camp, it's worth considering internships. It's worth considering freelancing. It's worth considering building some of your own projects and contributing to open source and finding ways to supplement that education. You're not gonna go out there feeling like I'm a bootcamp grad, that's all I'm ever gonna need, but that's, I think, true in any industry.
Can I ask a question? How much support do the boot camps give you in terms of finding a job support? Because for me, that would have been an incentive, because I feel like a lot of them do advertise this as a feature. But what's the truth there?
I can speak for the Wagon in that, so I graduated from that program almost 2 years ago now. And when I left that program, their career guidance consisted of one happy hour. It was almost non-existent. There was really no help. That said, the corollary to that is that since that time, they have built up their job hunting support quite a bit. And I ended up finding the job that I found by going to one of the career events for one of the next batches after me. And I continue to find support from the alumni community. And that's another way of networking. But certainly when I graduated, I think the Wagon was probably amongst the worst for career search help. But they've realized that people really need it. And so now they're doing, I think, a full week of post-grad career coaching and resume help. But having not been through it myself, I can't tell you how effective it is.
Well, I can rehabilitate Career Foundry in this case, because for me, I think their career change course, or even service, it's not really just a course, that was better than the actual bootcamp. I also felt like I had to work much harder at it, probably because I already had some skills, but I'm very bad at applying them to jobs. And how it looks is you complete your course with your specialization, and then it unlocks a career change course where you get some basic theory about how to beef up your LinkedIn, how to beef up a little bit your portfolio, building your personal brand, blah blah blah. And you also have a dedicated career advisor who is working with you, and you have actually Skype calls with them, so you can book. They're not always short-term available, but still you can find a place, let's say next week or this week. Book a call, and then after you have completed that career course, they stay with you for at least 6 months, or if you find a job earlier, then of course earlier, but you have a right to bother them and get their help with pretty much anything. So I haven't really used them much because I got into UX sort of through my own means. I was kind of trying to, I used them for resume, for the LinkedIn profile, for everything, but I didn't really follow up with the whole career change completely. So I don't know how it looks like, how it works. But with Career Foundry, they have the job guarantee program or principle, I guess. So if you tick all the boxes, let's say if you live in a big enough city where you can find sufficient amount of jobs, if you speak more or less the local language, and if you also follow all the directions from a career advisor, and you haven't found a job in a year, then they pay your money back. So very good plan. And in general, I can say that the career change was really good, and there is a Slack community. So once you graduate, you can stay with that Slack community and see any leads or any news, or attend, of course, the networking events and such. So they won't, of course, find jobs for you in the sense you'll have to find the jobs yourselves, but they will definitely help you prep for the interviews, compare, let's say, what was written in the job description and what you wrote in your application, maybe point out any mistakes that you made. So it was really good support. I think they should offer it as a self-standing service for anybody who wants to find a job, regardless whether you're a bootcamp person or not. And I would also say in terms of like fresh out of bootcamp, so unless you're really completely fresh, like you did your school and you went to bootcamp and you're like, I don't know, 21 years old, if you worked before, you're not completely fresh. You have some sort of transferable skills, because for me, for example, big selling point was my e-learning background, because once I kind of switched my gears and said, hey, I was in tech since 10 years, oh my God, I should not discount it as just e-learning. I am actually a product designer with huge experience. It is a very specialized experience, but it's actually a bit more complex than, let's say, just UX, because you have to think about how to help people learn interactively, not just, let's say, shop for things on Amazon, but shop for things which you don't really want to buy. While learning how to use those things at the same time. And once I kind of changed that mindset, I also noticed that I became also more confident when applying. And I also got more positive feedback from the people I was interviewing with this, because I noticed that I can, let's say, sell like the HR people, the hiring manager. So I proceed further a little bit down the line. So like I said, right now I'm kind of like losing the job offers if I don't fit in terms of let's say more focus on UI, something like that, which also doesn't fit for me, or corona reasons. So so for Career Founder I was quite happy with it.
Yeah, let me quickly explain this for Spice Academy. So there is actually a career coach who will have courses once a week after the 4 first weeks within the course. So yeah, they take care about this, because there's also kind of an agreement in the contract that they pay you the money back after a certain time. I don't remember what time it was exactly, but I feel like they really make sure that you're well prepared to apply for jobs, and you do a preparation interview and a kind of a little coding challenge if you want to, and you can get in contact with them afterwards. You can actually use their facility a few weeks longer, I think 4 weeks. 4 weeks you can stay there, you can stay around there, ask questions. So that's actually a really good thing, because then you will prepare or finish your projects for your portfolio, and you can actually shoot questions at the tutors still, even if they have time between the other classes where they're occupied a lot also. But yeah, they will help you. So this is actually pretty good. And I read something about code review. Yeah, I can say there is a lot of code review. They will look at the code, they will help you getting through this, or coming up with new ideas most of the time, something you don't know because you just started coding, right? And this is a really good thing to enhance your code. And pair programming, no, not really. Well, you sometimes follow someone who codes, or you come up with your own stuff, but you're not really sitting with someone. They wouldn't have the staff for this, right? For everyone on the class to do pair programming. So yeah.
My experience was almost the opposite. We didn't do a lot of code review. There wasn't a lot of formal style coaching, but almost all of the programming was pair programming, with a strong emphasis on TDD, test-driven development, and writing your code to your tests and setting up those parameters. So there's a lot of pair programming, a lot of collaboration. There was some review, and that there are TAs available to help you with your code when you need that help. But it was more of a pair programming focused program for me.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from here, maybe 1 from there and 1 to wrap up. Do you still learn new languages or challenge yourself on the job or for a new job? Jessica, you're nodding. Do you wanna start? I will unmute you. Give me a second.
Sorry, I muted myself so I could type in the box. Julia, I didn't do a bootcamp. I used only online resources. So, but I also would say I'm community taught / self-taught, just to answer that quickly. So then I won't mute myself to try and type in the box. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, because at this point I'm like a year and a half or just over as a developer, and I think this is a really a point where you start to feel like what should the next step be, and how do you keep advancing? Because like getting a job isn't the end goal, right? You want to like continue to grow within the industry. And I think a really common pattern you see is people kind of like switching up roles around the like year and 2 year point. And I do see a lot of benefit in that for multiple reasons. Some reasons around, if you go in as an intern or you go in as a junior, you may be considered for a much longer time to be at that level than if you move around. I think like there is this pattern where you can like advance in seniority, or at least in terms of like title and wage increase. Because yeah, I agree with what Meredith was saying earlier around titles not really having a standardization. But also in terms of being able to work on different code bases and have different experiences. And I think there's a lot of value in that. So if you work somewhere like maybe working on one very specific product in Python, and then you have the opportunity to maybe go and work on a slightly different product in Python, or you go and work on a similar product but in a different language, that's going to give you a lot of a more experience, and it's going to help you, I think, sort of broaden the scope of what kind of jobs you can also get if or when you choose to go into your next job. For me, it's like a big question because I don't want to leave the company I work in. I really love it at Kosher. So I'm trying to do something where I'm going to move like sideways or within the company. So like go work in a slightly different team, and have that opportunity to work with a different group of people on a slightly different code base. And I think that's, yeah, it's like you get the job and there is that period of time where you're like, yes, I have a job now. I'm a developer. I mean, it takes months until you realize that you're a developer, or it took me months until I would accept I was a developer. But that it doesn't stop there. At least it hasn't stopped there for me. I want to continue and I want to go further. And I'm trying to like read. I'm trying to do like more online courses again. And yeah, obviously not as much as I did before, but still a lot.
Yeah, same. I actually realized that our tools are written in C, and I did the bootcamp to learn Python. So there's a whole new language for me. Also, some tests we do, software tests, are in XML and Perl. So yeah, you learn all the time, I think, if you work on a team, on a project, or on a product which is just not contributed or kind of based in one language for some reason. I don't think that's possible if you apply a continuous integration pipeline and then you have other modules adding into the tool or the solution you sell or your company sells. You will end up with different languages after a while. So yeah, keep learning.
Yeah, I had that experience as well. I was hired as a full stack Ruby developer, and 3 months into working there, they decided that we should build a React app. So I learned React entirely on the job. I have at times considered learning other languages for fun. For a minute, I was trying to learn Go. And then I decided that for me, it made more sense to deepen my knowledge of the languages that I was working in before trying to pick up something completely different. And to be honest, Go is about as different from Ruby as I could imagine in its syntax. So yeah, for me, focusing on the language that I've learned and also picking up a new one at work was plenty for me.
Come join Women Who Go, Meredith.
Oh, I'll be back one of these days.
Great. Maya, do you want to add something to that question, or shall I ask my last question?
Well, I don't learn languages, although since I worked with like a PO and a UX designer on a software development project, I actually had to learn a little bit about Python, but a lot about, let's say, the Docker, the GitHub, the everything. So the working stuff. I also learned a lot about the Open edX, which is powering the edx.org, and how horrible it is, and how the developers hate it. But yeah, other than that, I catch up on any online courses. So after my full-time bootcamp, I'm taking my further studies very measured and pacing myself. But at the moment, there's quite a lot of opportunities for free education, because with the corona, a lot of online companies like Udemy and such, they started offering free classes. So right now I'm actually doing with IBM their what's it called, the design thinking, I think, for enterprises. Which is quite fun. I'm also criticizing as an instructional designer, so it could improve a little bit. But yeah, the learning doesn't really stop, because there's always something new. With UX, there's even new tools coming up. There's actually, I think the problem with the industry is sometimes having like a learning burnout, because you see like there's so many things around you that you could improve, or so many new skills you could learn, or so many new tools you could try, that it's very easy to get just overwhelmed. So the key for me is really keeping an idea of what I want to be or what I want to focus on, and really limiting it in the sense of keeping it just manageable. So not to go insane with all the things that I'm not doing because I don't have time in 24 hours.
Awesome. Thank you all very much for sharing with us this evening. We're almost at the end of our event. I want to be mindful of everybody's evening. So I have one final question, which I already gave the heads up to our panelists about. What are the 2 things that you want the attendees to remember from our panel discussion? The 2 super important messages that you want to make sure they leave the event with. Anybody wants to start?
Yeah, I can start. I think what I found out for myself is that we all have a previous career, right? And we choose this path because we like something about this job. So maybe it's worth thinking about not abandoning this after all totally. So there must be something you still like, and you have knowledge about this. You had years developing this knowledge. So maybe you try to do the crossover. Everything is going to be digitized in one way or the other nowadays. So maybe you can work somewhere or invent yourself new or a new position in a company that you maybe like, where you can do both. You can apply your previous knowledge and you can do a programming job or a tech-related job. And I think this is an important point I want the people to remember.
Thank you, Heike. Jessica, do you want to go next?
Sure. First thing would be, you've heard 4 very different journeys this evening. There are a million others. Don't let anyone define what that's going to be for you, and take the path that is working best for you. And that might be false starts, might be multiple starts. You might get halfway through and say, hey, this isn't for me, but it's totally like your journey. And the second thing I would say, I kind of always say, is like, I really would recommend joining the local community, because I think it's such a support network, and also there are lots of benefits of the fact that you get to go to companies and meet companies. And one thing I found quite beneficial also was joining the organizing team of a tech community. Now, don't do it just to get a job, because like it's a lot of work and a lot of other commitment, but it is a great way to meet companies in a slightly different angle, where you're not going there and being like, please employ me, or like, please host our community event. Oh, and by the way, I'm also looking for a job. And this actually can be like a very big positive thing. Also, it's super rewarding to work in the community, and you know, it's people like Greene, people like Natalie from Women Techmakers, Rona from Women Who Go. They will support you, and I think like you're not in it alone is what I want to say.
Thank you, Jessica. Meredith, want to go next?
Sure. I actually want to co-sign a lot of what Jessica said. I think for me, one of the things that I have found most rewarding about coding is that it is very collaborative, and it's given me an opportunity to work with smart, curious people who, I mean, code can also be very humbling. So even the more senior people I've worked with have been really accessible, and that collaboration has really been the thing that keeps me going and keeps me happy in what I'm doing. And I have found that while I may not have planned it and researched it all that much, I have really loved this career change, and I really enjoy the work that I'm doing and the people that I'm working with. So that people part of it is not to be overlooked. It's both important to producing good code and doing good work, and also one of the perks of working in this way. And then actually also, Jessica talked about organizing. One of the more rewarding things that I have found post bootcamp is I've had the opportunity to go back and do a little bit of teaching. We've been doing some one-day workshops, building a landing page, bringing people who have never written a line of code in and teaching, and also just participating in meetups and passing along that knowledge to other people. It's both rewarding, and it reinforces that I know something that is of value. It reminds me that I can do some things, and also just that sharing is really rewarding. So yeah, I completely co-sign the idea that participating in the community will reward you in many, many ways, not just in finding a job, but you'll be happier for it.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Yeah, I would definitely also +1 everything that has been said before, especially about teaching, because now that I have experience both going through the bootcamp and being a tutor in the same bootcamp and the same program, I know my stuff way better than I did before, just by explaining it over and over and over again to at least 7 students so far. Also, if anybody wants any advice on how to do trainings better, you can reach out to me. It's not a sales pitch, so just poke me on LinkedIn if you're interested, upping up your teaching game. But in terms of 2 things to take away, I would say, things will take time. So if you're looking for a career change or even for a new job, especially at this time, having myself survive recession, moved countries several times, also switched careers, it will take time sometimes. So do not see it as a sign of failure or discouragement, because there's always somebody who got their job just out of the blue, straight out of bootcamp, straight out of university or something like that. And part of it is really luck, but part of it is also, it's like putting yourself out there. Because let's say you could say, I got my UX job because I knew somebody, but how did I know somebody? Because I went out there and got to know them in the first place. So it will take time, it will take effort. Just do this effort, don't give up, and reach out to somebody if you want to talk. So since I also worked for fancy labels like Amazon, Blizzard, if you want to chat about, let's say, interviewing, I won't help with technical interviews, of course, with developers, but let's say how to pass this cars and everything that big companies are using, I can give advice, again, for free, not a sales pitch. And lastly, as I said, things take time. So let's say if you're planning a career change, if you want to, let's say, like quit or something like that, I would really recommend, and that helped myself, I would really recommend to have like a go-to-hell fund, as it's called. So stash away some sort of financial pillow that will keep you afloat. Because right now, let's say, why am I kind of happy to be unemployed? Because I can afford to be. So I do not feel like I was in 2008 when I was under risk of losing a job and I was in Latvia, and that was really horrible because I had really savings for like 2 months maybe, and now I'm okay, so I'm fine. I also have a husband hopefully who can support us, but he's also working for startups, so we are aware that we may suddenly both lose our jobs, but we have enough, let's say, financial support for us, which we just kind of saved because I'm used to budgeting, and it really helps to, let's say, to limit yourself in some things, to have little rewards but still limit yourself in some things, to build up this pillow, because it will definitely pay off if you want to change something, do something, or some sort of crisis happens to your life.
Thank you. Thank you all one more time for talking about your journey. Thank you to everybody who joined us. I will stop recording now.